You railed against Davos Man. How much money did you make in the city? That rather is irrelevant.
That's such a childish question.
Well,
I've never had anything to do with Davos, and I know that you've become a very left-wing broadcaster.
What will success for this project look like, Mr. Rees-Mogg?
What we're doing is talking about the ideas that conservatism needs. So it's a question of whether people find these ideas resonate with them. That will be success.
Is it not rather pathetic for members of a party, senior members of a party like yourself, who've been in government for 14 years, to rail against the system? If you don't mind my saying so, you sound rather left-wing. You sound rather like a sort of right-wing Bennite, constantly saying, you know, power is the problem, institutions are the problem, they have to be changed.
No, I think you've got it fundamentally wrong. That we had no ability to change the system until we'd left the European Union, and we then had COVID. And all parties at all times need to be thinking about the structures of government, how things work, how they operate. Because the way to get things done is through the structures of government. And sometimes they need changing, and they were changed very effectively by Tony Blair.
So you didn't have power to change the schooling system?
We did change the schooling system, as Liz Truss said. Perhaps you should have listened to her speech.
I did listen to it, and
she said one of the things we did successfully was in education.
And yet she talked about wokeism in schools. If there's wokeism in schools, your government could remove it at a stroke, surely.
Not at a stroke, no. You need to legislate, and new guidelines have been issued. Say these things are moving in the right direction.
So what's the problem?
But we need to move further and faster. This is the whole life and blood of politics.
You railed against Davos Man. How much money did you make in the city? That rather is irrelevant.
That's such a childish question. I've never had anything to do with Davos, and I know that you've become a very left-wing broadcaster, but asking me lefty questions doesn't really get us anywhere.
It's not a matter of left or right, it's a matter of probing your position, Mr.
I've never had
Rees-Mogg.
anything to do with Davos at all.
But Davos, I would imagine what you're suggesting by talking about Davos is a sense of a man...
of internationalism.
Yes.
I'm in favour of the nation state, which was clear from my speech, if you've listened.
I listened to every word you said, but it still seemed to me, I listened extremely carefully, but it's possible and entirely appropriate that we try and probe some of the intellectual positions. Good. I mean, it's not one of the problems...
You seem to be representing the left wing. Are you doing your bit of due impartiality that Ofcom requires you? Or are you here as a left-wing broadcaster?
Mr. Rees-Mogg, I know
I'm
that you're
very
rather...
interested in this, because this comes up with GB News, which I broadcast
Which, of course, is completely impartial. Mr. Rees-Mogg...
It meets the requirements of due impartiality, and
well,
I'm
not according to Ofcom. Mr. Rees-Mogg, I know that you want to go on the attack rather than talking about the issues.
Do you meet the requirements of due impartiality?
If you would allow to, absolutely. And unlike GB News, of course, which is repeatedly...
A strong left-wing
Mr. Rees-Mogg, I'm not putting a strong left-wing view of anything. I'm simply trying to ask you and interrogate you about some... No, not at all. Well, according to your own summary, one more question. Is not one of the problems... Well, I would do if you allow me to actually ask a question.
Again. Please get the point.
Honestly. Is not one of the problems that conservatives such as yourself have started to go down a track where you're not willing to accept trade-offs? Yes, we could pull out of all of these institutions and organisations, but ultimately there will be costs in so doing, just as there was with Brexit. And sometimes you start to talk about a world as you would like it to be, rather than the world as it is, which is exactly the sort of thing that conservatives used to be very good at addressing.
No, the Conservative Party has always been a practical party, and there are always trade-offs with doing one thing or another. But parties have to talk about ideas, otherwise they get nowhere. You seem to wish to live in an ideas-free zone. It's quite extraordinary.
Ideas-free zone? Not
That's
at all.
what you seem to be arguing for.
Anyway,
you said that was the last question.
Indeed.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Rees-Mogg. Thank you.
The Newsagents. This is a Global Player original podcast.